This is Matthew Cratter from Bitcoin University. Today I want to talk about inmates running the asylum. If you're not familiar with this expression, what it means is putting people in charge of important things when they themselves should be the ones receiving treatment. For example, if you're going to have a health minister, you probably shouldn't have a health minister who looks like this. And don't misunderstand what I'm saying here. 70% of my fellow Americans are overweight or obese. So I'm very sympathetic to this struggle in the modern world. This modern world where Warren Buffett's junk food companies are trying to stuff garbage into your mouth from the moment you're born, beginning with soy baby formula. But what I'm saying is that if you look like this person, maybe you shouldn't be giving other people nutritional advice. This is just common sense. And if you want to at least pretend to be running a serious country, maybe you shouldn't put someone like this in charge of a country's health policy when they don't even know how to deal with their own body. And then, of course, they're going to give bad advice, like eat a lot of whole grains and eat a lot of beans and eventually probably eat insects. We have something similar happening in the government and central banking industries. We have Janet Yellen, for example, who back when she was chair of the Fed, the Federal Reserve, which is the central bank in the US, said that she expected no new financial crisis in our lifetimes. That was back in 2017, and we didn't have to wait very long for her to be proven wrong. We had the repo crisis of 2019, we had the stock market crash of 2020, and we have the ongoing banking crisis that began in 2023 and has really been continuing since then. As we said, Janet did such a bad job as chair of the Fed that I guess in fiat clown world, it made perfect sense to give her another round as U.S. Treasury Secretary, which is what she's doing now. If you're enjoying this video so far, I just ask you to help to support the channel. Click the subscribe button, leave a like, comment, and also share this video with a friend. In case you're wondering how Janet Yellen could have known that there would still be subsequent financial crises in her lifetime, all she needed to do was look at the U.S. debt load, look at the U.S. unfunded liabilities today at $215 trillion, and you could at least hazard a guess that something was going to go wrong in our lifetime. But that's not the emphasis of this video. I want to talk about Jared Bernstein today, who's the chair of the Council of Economic Advisors in the Biden administration. And someone had the great idea to ask him a question about money printing, and we're going to see what he has to say.
The U.S. government can't go bankrupt because we can print our own money.
It obviously begs the question, why exactly are we borrowing in a currency that we print ourselves? I'm waiting for someone to stand up and say, why do we borrow our own currency in the first place?
Like you said, they print the dollar, so why does the government even borrow?
Well, I mean, again, some of this stuff gets, some of the language that some of the language and concepts are just confusing. I mean, the government definitely prints money, and it definitely lends that money, which is why the government definitely prints money, and then it lends that money by selling bonds. Is that what they do? They sell bonds. Yeah, they sell bonds, right? Because they sell bonds and people buy the bonds and lend them the money. Yeah. So a lot of times, at least to my ear with MMT, the language and the concepts can be kind of unnecessarily confusing, but there is no question that the government prints money and then it uses that money to yeah, I guess I can't really talk. I don't get it. I don't know what they're talking about, like, because it's like.
This is not a deepfake. This is a real video. Here's a man who's obviously made his way through life just repeating the official talking points. He subscribes to MMT, modern monetary theory, and yet, as he says, it's very confusing and he doesn't understand it at all. He's never spent even 5 minutes doing the proof of work of actually thinking through these economic principles for himself, which is why he cannot explain it when asked. This is not just an academic mistake, though, that Bernstein is making. His complete lack of understanding is hurting the very same people that he has supposedly devoted his life and time to trying to help. For example, a couple of years ago, he authored a book called Crunch. With Crunch, Bernstein effectively validates the daily experience of working people struggling to keep up in a treadmill economy. You'd think since he wrote a book on the topic that he would have a deeper understanding of these things, but this is how it actually works. This working class, and also we might add middle class treadmill, is primarily caused by the government siphoning off economic value from the creators of that economic value through the printing of money. So working class people work for their money while their government and monetary overlords print up that same money for free, diluting the holdings of everyone else and causing inflation. This money printing disproportionately hurts the working and middle classes who have historically, at least before Bitcoin, not had access to the same tools that the wealthy have to protect themselves from monetary debasement. So since Jared doesn't understand it, let me explain to him how it works. Governments issue debt in order to be able to spend beyond their means, and Jared seems a bit confused by this. It's actually the people who buy their bonds who are lending the government the money. So governments issue debt, central banks purchase that debt with newly printed fiat money, thus monetizing government deficit spending. And then what happens is central banks pretend that they're on your side, that they're trying to stop inflation, when in fact they're the very ones causing it through their money printing. And then you have academics, you have people like Jared Bernstein, and you have politicians telling you that their stealing from you every year is actually necessary and good for the world. We have the IMF saying that low, stable, and predictable inflation is good for the economy. Now, if you want to rob someone effectively and over a long period of time, you don't take all the money out of their wallet or bank account all at once. You just take out a little bit every week so that they don't notice. And this is what the IMF and fiat economists mean by low, stable inflation. What they mean is we want to steal from you as much as possible, but not so much that you start to wake up and notice. Unfortunately, our educational systems and the mainstream media are allies in this propaganda war. For example, schools never teach you about inflation or how fiat money works, and you'll actually learn the least amount in an economics department, in an actual economics department, which is always full of Keynesians whose main job is to write long tomes that justify massive government interference in an economy. And then what happens is the mainstream media writes propaganda for the general public. That's how we get articles like this, why inflation can actually be good for everyday Americans and bad for rich people. They've got it exactly backwards. I thought it was interesting that Jared Bernstein mentioned MMT, modern monetary theory, because it really is the culmination of this government central bank propaganda war. We've talked about this before on the channel a few years back, but MMT asserts that governments do not need to worry about printing money or accumulating massive amounts of debt. How convenient, because they can always massively raise taxes to choke off inflation when it arrives. This is what MMT economists assert what actually takes place, though, is governments steal from us in two different ways. They steal from us in terms of money printing, and they steal from us with excessive taxes. And the great thing about MMT, at least for their side of things, is that MMT is this pseudoscience that provides the justification for a never-ending war on private property. Governments should always be printing, according to MMT economists, and then when they can't print anymore, when the market calls them on it, then they should just confiscate as much as they can through taxation. It's funny, over the past 100 years, how the universities have always been pro-government theft, whether it's Nazi Germany, the USSR, or the late-stage American Empire. I'll link to this article, Wikipedia article, on MMT if you want to learn more. How to deal with central bankers and politicians like Jared Bernstein. I think this interviewer did a really good job, and she's following in the footsteps of a suggestion that was made by the great Hans Hermann Hoppe, who in this video, courtesy of Tur de Meester, talks about how we can deal with this.
Important in these replies to people like Krugman that we don't get involved in technical details but ask them questions almost like a child. Explain to me how an increase in paper pieces can possibly make a society richer. If that was the case, explain to me why is there still poverty in the world? Isn't every central bank in the world capable of printing as much paper as they want? And do you then think the society, the world as a whole would be richer? I'm sure the guy cannot answer this type of question. Nobody can answer this type of question.
And it turns out that Jared Bernstein indeed could not answer this type of question. So I think this is one avenue that we can explore. And this is one reason why I make fun of people like Jared Bernstein on this channel, because what they're doing is they're really undermining their own mission. Maybe their own mission was just to accumulate wealth and status for themselves. But to the extent that politicians and regulators and policymakers understand how the economy really works, to that extent they can actually help the people who need help rather than just helping the mouthpieces of the regime. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit the subscribe and like buttons. Hit the notification bell if you want to be notified when I publish my next video. And let me know your questions and comments in the comment section below. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.